My name is Mara Ellison. I was 29 years old when I learned that a person could be surrounded by family and still have no one in the room willing to protect her. Dr. Priya Nanduri stood inches from me in a curtained examination bay at Fairmont Regional Hospital, wiping blood from my cheek with a square of wet gauze. Each careful pass exposed another sting along my hairline. The overhead light was painfully white. My stomach rolled every time I tried to focus on her face, and somewhere beyond the curtain, my mother was telling a nurse that I had slipped. I had not slipped. My older brother, Caleb, had seized my phone and slammed my head into the office wall beneath a framed sign that said, "Ellison Restoration, built on trust." My mother leaned toward the opening in the curtain. "He didn't mean to. Don't report it." Then softer, only for me, she added, "Stay quiet. Don't make a scene." Dr. Nanduri stopped cleaning. Her eyes moved from my mother to me, then to the phone lying beside my hip. A message glowed on its cracked screen. Caleb had written that I needed to say I fell, or he would finish what he started when I came home. The doctor's expression changed, but her voice did not rise. She asked whether Caleb was in the hospital. Before I could make my mouth form an answer, she looked at the older injury listed in my chart and said, "Not this time." She reached for the phone. What I did not yet understand was that she remembered me. 10 months earlier, she had treated another injury I claimed was an accident, while my mother answered every question for me. I had thought the lie disappeared when I left the hospital. Instead, it had been waiting in my medical record for the day I finally told the truth. If anyone has ever asked you to protect a family by pretending they did not hurt you, stay with me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video, because stories like mine survive when people refuse to look away. While you listen, consider what you would have done in that hospital room, with your mother beside you and your brother waiting somewhere beyond the door. To explain why my doctor's hand moving toward a telephone felt more frightening than the blood on my face, I have to go back 5 years, to the promise I made when I believed helping my family would be temporary. I had been living in Columbus then, sharing an apartment with my college roommate, Audrey Kim, and working in the internal audit department of a regional building supplier. The position was junior, the pay was ordinary, and I loved it. Numbers behaved according to rules. When an account failed to balance, I could trace the difference until I found the decision that caused it. No total ever called me disloyal for noticing. Then my mother, Diane, was diagnosed with breast cancer. My father asked me to come home for 3 months. Ellison Restoration needed someone to handle payroll and compliance while Mom underwent surgery and treatment. Caleb ran the field crews, but forms, tax deadlines, insurance certificates, and vendor accounts bored him. Dad said I was the only person he trusted to keep everything straight. I heard love in that sentence. I did not hear the lock turning. 3 months became 6. Mom needed more treatment. Then the bookkeeper retired. Dad offered me a permanent salary, health insurance, and the apartment over the detached records garage behind the company warehouse. The apartment was small, but he charged no rent. He called it a chance to save. I called Audrey and promised I would return to Columbus as soon as the family was stable. Stability became a horizon that moved whenever I approached it. 5 years later, I was still processing payroll for 18 employees from a narrow office that smelled of dust, wet lumber, and the industrial coffee my father brewed all day. I carried keys to the office, warehouse, records garage, and my apartment on one steel ring. Dad owned every door they opened. Our company repaired homes after pipes burst, storms tore away roofs, or basements flooded. Russell Ellison had built it from one truck and a borrowed ladder. His crews respected him because he never asked them to work a night he would not work himself. Customers trusted my mother because she remembered their children's names and delivered casseroles when a family lost a kitchen to fire. In public, my parents were generous people. In private, generosity followed a hierarchy. Dad made decisions, Mom softened them. Caleb challenged them until Dad yielded. I made the consequences fit inside the budget. Caleb was 34, 5 years older than me, and had been introduced as Dad's successor since he was old enough to carry a toolbox. He could walk into a water-damaged house full of panicked strangers and make everyone believe he had already solved the problem. He remembered which employee needed overtime and which customer could not afford a deductible. When things went his way, he was funny, energetic, and almost impossible not to like. When they did not, his face seemed to close from the inside. We had good memories. He taught me to ride a bicycle by running behind me until I stopped wobbling. When I was 12, he frightened off 2 boys who followed me from school. For years, whenever he punched a door, broke a plate, or said something cruel enough to make me cry, my mother brought up those memories as evidence of who he truly was. His tenderness counted as character. His violence counted as a moment. 6 months before the day he attacked me, his wife, Hannah, left him and took their 8-year-old daughter, Ruby. My parents said Hannah had become vindictive. Caleb said she was punishing him because he worked too much. I had once been close to her, but after she moved out, she stopped answering my messages. I accepted the family's explanation because the alternative required questions I was not prepared to ask. There was already one question I avoided every morning when I climbed the stairs to my office. 10 months before the central assault, Caleb had shoved me near the company's back stairwell after I refused to alter an employee's hours. I fell down 4 steps and struck my shoulder and temple. At this same hospital, I told Dr. Nanduri I had slipped while carrying archive boxes. Mom had sat beside me and explained the fall before I finished describing it. Caleb sent flowers the next morning. Dad paid the bill. Within a week, the incident had been reduced to a family misunderstanding that kindness required me to stop mentioning. After that, I became better at predicting Caleb's moods. I scheduled difficult questions when Dad was present. I left doors open. I kept my voice low. I told myself this was professionalism. The false vendor appeared on a Tuesday morning in October. I was completing the quarterly compliance review when I noticed 6 payments to Ridgeway Materials, a supplier I did not recognize. Ellison Restoration bought lumber, drywall, flooring, and dehumidifier parts from dozens of vendors, so an unfamiliar name was not automatically suspicious. What caught my attention was the roundness of the amounts: $9,000, $7,800, $12,000. Real material orders usually carried the untidy specificity of quantities, tax, and delivery fees. Ridgeway's insurance certificate was missing. Its tax form listed a post office box instead of a business address. The phone number on 3 invoices had 1 digit more than a valid American number. When I checked the purchase authorizations, everyone carried Caleb's electronic approval. I searched the state business registry. Ridgeway Materials did not exist. The payments totaled $74,300. My first reaction was not that Caleb had stolen money. My first reaction was that someone had compromised his account. That was how deeply the family habit lived inside me. Even alone, with evidence on both monitors, I invented an explanation that preserved his innocence. Then I found a bank routing confirmation attached to the most recent payment. The contact email used a nickname Caleb had carried since high school. The mailing address belonged to a private box 2 streets from the sports betting lounge where he met clients on Friday evenings. Another transfer for $11,000 was scheduled to clear at noon. I froze it. The accounting system generated an exception report automatically. I saved a copy to the compliance folder, printed another for Dad, and sent a routine backup to the encrypted cloud archive we used for tax records. I did not think of those steps as evidence preservation. They were simply what I did whenever an account failed to balance. At 10:15, I carried the printed report into Dad's office. His chair was empty, his mug was warm, and his jacket hung from the back of the door. My mother said he had driven to a job site after a customer threatened to cancel. I asked when he would return. "After lunch," she said. Then she studied my face. "Is something wrong?" I almost handed her the report. Instead, I folded it against my notebook. Mom had spent the previous week telling me how badly Caleb was coping with the separation, how ashamed he felt that Ruby did not want to sleep at his apartment, how pressure could make a good person behave unlike himself. I told her there was a payment question Dad needed to review. Her concern sharpened. "A question about Caleb?" That was the first moment I understood she already suspected something. Before I could respond, the warehouse door struck the wall hard enough to rattle the glass in Dad's bookcase. Caleb crossed the front office without greeting either of us. He still wore his work boots, carrying damp grit across the clean floor. His phone was in his hand, open to the notification showing that I had frozen his transfer. "Unlock it," he said. Mom stepped between us with both palms raised, not to stop him, but to lower the emotional temperature. "Let's wait for your father." Caleb ignored her. "Mara, unlock the transfer. I said the vendor documentation was invalid and the payment could not be released without review. It's an emergency supplier." "Then it should exist." The answer came out more directly than I intended. His jaw shifted. My mother whispered my name as a warning. Caleb smiled, but there was no humor in it. He reminded me that I processed forms while he kept the company alive. He said a payroll clerk did not have authority to interfere with operations. I told him compliance was my authority and that Dad would decide when he returned. "You're going to show him?" I held the report tighter. "Yes." He glanced at Mom. She looked toward the windows, checking whether anyone in the warehouse could see us. That small movement frightened me more than his voice. It told me her first instinct was already concealment. "Caleb told me to come into the records office so we could discuss the account privately." I refused. He repeated himself in the soft, patient tone he used with customers who did not understand their insurance. Mom touched my elbow and said I should let him explain. I went because I had been trained to regard refusal as escalation and compliance as peace. The records office was 10 feet long and barely wide enough for 2 filing cabinets, my desk, and a visitor chair. On the wall behind me hung Dad's framed company slogan. The glass reflected Caleb as he closed the door. He started with charm. He said Ridgeway was temporary. He said cash flow had become complicated during his separation. He promised he would replace every dollar after an insurance settlement cleared. When I asked whether Ridgeway bought any materials, his expression changed. "You went looking for a crime," he said. "That's what you always do. You make people look guilty so you can feel smarter than them." I told him the records were not an opinion. He said I had no idea what it cost to carry the company while Dad treated him like a disappointment, and I waited for him to fail. He spoke faster as he went, turning each question into an injury I had supposedly caused him. I knew that pattern. If I comforted him, he would ask for the transfer. If I refused, he would call my refusal cruelty. I placed my phone on the desk and said I was leaving the payment frozen until Dad saw the report. Caleb stepped between me and the door. My pulse began beating in the bruise that no longer existed on my temple. I asked him to move. He said I was not leaving until I unlocked the account. I reached for my phone, intending to call Dad. Caleb grabbed it first. I remember the crack of its case striking the filing cabinet. I remember reaching for it and feeling his hand close around my upper arm. I told him he was hurting me. He said I was destroying his life. Then he drove me backward. The framed slogan hit the wall before my head did. Its lower corner twisted, and the glass split in a bright diagonal line. A fraction of a second later, the left side of my forehead struck the plaster beneath it. There was no dramatic burst of pain. There was a white flash, a blunt sound inside my skull, and then the sensation that the floor had tilted upright. My knees folded. I caught the edge of the desk and slid against it, scattering folders across the tiles. Caleb stood over me, breathing hard. His anger disappeared so quickly it might have belonged to someone else. "Look what you made me do." Warm blood moved past my eyebrow. I touched it and stared at the red on my fingers. Caleb crouched, not to help me, but to take the report from the floor. I held one corner. He pulled until the paper tore. My mother opened the door. For one suspended moment, she saw everything without an explanation between us. Caleb gripping half the report, my phone near his boot, the broken frame, and me bleeding against the desk. "Mom," I said. She looked at Caleb first. He told her I had lunged for the phone and lost my balance. I said he had slammed me into the wall. She pressed a hand to her mouth, but the shock on her face became calculation almost immediately. She picked up my phone, inspected the cracked screen, and told Caleb to find Dad. "Call an ambulance," I said. "You're conscious." She knelt beside me. "Let me see." I tried to stand and the room shifted. I sat down again. Mom pulled tissues from the box on my desk and pressed them to my hairline. The first wad turned red in seconds. Dad arrived before Caleb returned. He took in the office with the same expression he used when a crew damaged a customer's property. Not grief, not surprise, but rapid assessment of cost. He asked whether anyone in the warehouse had seen us enter. Mom said she did not think so. I repeated that Caleb had done it. Dad looked at the broken frame, then at the blood soaking through Mom's hand. "We need to slow down," he said. "Nobody says anything until we understand what happened." I understand what happened. He crouched far enough away that he did not touch me. "Your brother panicked. That doesn't make him a criminal." Caleb reappeared at the door. His face was pale now. He apologized without naming what he had done. He said he had only tried to stop me from taking the phone. Dad ordered him into the warehouse office and closed the door again. My parents talked above me as if I were both evidence and inconvenience. Dad said an ambulance would bring police questions and workers would see it. Mom said she could drive me if the bleeding did not stop. Dad insisted we first clean the office. That was when I understood they were not frozen by shock. They were making choices. Mom helped me upstairs to my apartment. Each step produced a pulse of nausea. She sat me on the closed toilet lid and cleaned the blood with a washcloth. When I looked in the mirror, the left side of my face was streaked pink, my hair was matted, and my eyes did not seem to be focusing together. "We'll get you checked," she said. "But you need to be careful how you describe it." I asked why I needed to be careful when Caleb had not been careful with me. She flinched. "He didn't mean for you to hit the wall." The distinction mattered to her. Caleb had meant to grab me. He had meant to frighten me. He had meant to stop me from showing Dad the report. But because he had not selected the exact injury in advance, Mom believed the injury should not determine what happened next. I vomited into the sink. Only then did she decide we could no longer wait. Dad met us beside her car. He had put the torn report inside his jacket. He told me the company could not survive police going through its accounts. 18 families depended on those paychecks. Ruby had already lost daily access to her father. Mom had just recovered from cancer. He arranged every fact around Caleb until reporting him appeared to be an attack on everyone else. I asked what would happen to me if I went back upstairs. Neither parent answered. Dad said Caleb would stay away for the night. Mom guided me into the passenger seat. Before closing the door, Dad leaned down and said I had fallen while reaching for a file. His voice was calm enough to make the lie sound like a practical instruction. On the drive to Fairmont Regional, my phone vibrated in my lap. Caleb's first message said he was sorry. The second said I had forced him into a corner. The third reminded me that Dad owned my apartment and signed my paychecks. I turned the screen down. At the hospital, Mom answered the triage nurse's questions before I could process them. She said I had fallen at work, struck a frame, and become sick afterward. The nurse asked me directly whether anyone had hurt me. I saw Mom's hand tighten around the strap of her purse. I said no. The lie came automatically. That frightened me more than telling it deliberately would have. Dr. Priya Nanduri entered after a technician checked my pupils and vital signs. I did not recognize her immediately. She recognized me. Her gaze paused on my name, moved to the bruise beginning beneath the blood, and returned to my mother. She asked Mom to wait outside during the examination. Mom said I was concussed and needed help answering. Dr. Nanduri said she would bring her back if I requested it. There was no argument in her tone, only a boundary. A nurse held the curtain, and for once, my mother's social warmth did not alter the decision. She left. The room became unnaturally quiet. Dr. Nanduri irrigated the cut, checked my neck, and asked what had happened. I began with the company version. I said I had reached for a file. She listened without interrupting, then pulled my earlier hospital record onto the computer. 10 months ago, you fell carrying archive boxes, she said. My mouth went dry. She did not accuse me of lying. She asked who had been present then. I said my mother. She asked whether the same person had injured me on both occasions. The question opened a space I had spent years keeping closed. I said my brother's name. Dr. Nanduri set the gauze down. She asked whether Caleb had access to my home. I said my father owned it. She asked whether Caleb was at the hospital. I did not know. My phone lit again. Caleb's message filled the screen. Tell them you slipped, or I'll finish it when you get home. The doctor read it because I turned the phone toward her. Then she said the words I had already heard at the beginning of this story. Not this time. She reached for the wall phone and called hospital security. Within 2 minutes, the exterior doors were being watched, my visitor status had been restricted, and a security officer confirmed that Caleb and my father were in the waiting area asking which room held me. Dr. Nanduri did not call the police without me. She asked whether I wanted an advocate who could explain my choices. I said yes. That one word felt larger than the room. The advocate's name was Lena Ortiz. She sat at eye level and explained that security could keep my family out while I received treatment. She said I could authorize photographs, preserve the messages, speak with an officer, seek a temporary protection order, or decline any of those options. She did not tell me what a strong person would do. She gave me enough information to make a decision that belonged to me. Mom began calling, then Dad. Their names alternated across my screen, while Dr. Nanduri closed the laceration above my eyebrow. I muted the phone, but could not stop watching it light up. I thought of 18 employees. I thought of Ruby. I thought of Mom's surgical scar and Dad's first borrowed ladder. I thought of Caleb running behind my bicycle, shouting that he would not let me fall. Then I thought of him taking the report while I bled on the floor. I authorized the photographs. When Officer Serena Holt entered, I almost withdrew permission. The sight of her uniform made every warning my parents had given me feel immediate. She began by confirming that I understood I could pause. Then she asked me to describe what happened in my own words. I told her about Ridgeway materials, the frozen transfer, the records office, my phone, Caleb's hand on my arm, and the wall. I told her my parents had delayed treatment. I showed her the messages. When she asked whether Caleb had hurt me before, I described the stairwell for the first time without calling it a fall. The account did not sound dramatic. It sounded procedural, almost plain. Yet each complete sentence made returning to the family version harder. Officer Holt preserved images of the messages and gave me an incident number. Lena began the emergency order paperwork. Dr. Nanduri reviewed concussion precautions and told me I should not be alone overnight. I had one person outside the family whom I could call. Audrey answered on the second ring. We had not spoken in 3 months. I had canceled our last 2 plans because Caleb needed help with invoices and Dad needed someone to supervise payroll. When she heard my voice, she did not ask why I had disappeared again. She asked which entrance was safe. Hospital security escorted me through a staff corridor after midnight. Caleb and Dad remained near the public waiting room. Mom had left me 17 voicemails. Audrey waited in her old blue hatchback with a blanket on the passenger seat. She looked at the bandage, the swelling, and the plastic hospital bag holding my blood-stained blouse. Her face tightened, but she did not demand an explanation before driving. At her duplex, she gave me water, set alarms for the concussion checks Dr. Nanduri required, and placed a spare key on the bedside table. The key was brass and almost weightless compared with the steel ring still in my purse. I did not feel brave. I felt like I had stepped off a roof and had not yet reached the ground. By morning, Lena confirmed that a judge had approved a temporary protection order. Caleb could not contact me directly or through anyone else. He could not approach Audrey's home, my workplace while I retrieved property under supervision, or the hospital. I read the order 3 times. It was the first document I had ever seen that treated my safety as a fact rather than a family negotiation. Then the messages from everyone else began. An aunt asked whether I understood what an arrest would do to Ruby. A crew supervisor said employees were frightened the company accounts would be frozen. A woman from my parents' church reminded me that anger passed, but accusations remained. No one asked what Caleb had done. They asked what I intended to do about what he had done. Audrey watched me compose and delete replies. "You don't have to answer today," she said. "If I don't answer, they'll think the worst." They already decided what to think before they asked. Her directness stung because it removed the task I knew how to perform. There was no perfect sentence that could make people acknowledge the assault without disliking its consequences. At noon, an email arrived from Dad's company account. My employment was terminated for unauthorized interference with vendor payments and removal of confidential records. My health coverage would end according to the policy schedule. I had 48 hours to surrender all company property. 5 minutes later, the electronic code to my apartment stopped working. Dad owned the door. He had finally reminded me. Officer Holt arranged for a civil standby so I could collect clothing, medication, and personal documents. I returned to Ellison Restoration with Audrey and a uniformed officer. The warehouse went quiet when we entered. Men I had paid accurately for years looked at the floor. Mom waited beside the stairs, holding 2 empty boxes. She looked smaller than she had at the hospital. For one dangerous second, I wanted to put my arms around her and let her tell me how to make everything normal. "Your father will reverse this," she said. "You can come back. Tell the police there was confusion after you hit your head. Say Caleb grabbed for the phone and you lost your balance." That isn't what happened. It doesn't have to be a lie. You were disoriented. The offer was shaped like mercy. My home, job, insurance, and mother were all waiting on the other side of one altered sentence. I removed the steel key ring from my purse. Mom held out her hand, but I placed it on the reception counter between us. "He slammed my head into a wall," I said. "You saw me bleeding and you protected him." Her face folded. "I was trying to protect all of you." I picked up my boxes and walked upstairs. The apartment already felt searched, though nothing obvious was missing. I packed clothes, my passport, a photograph of Audrey and me at graduation, and the ceramic bowl Hannah had given me when Ruby was born. I left the furniture because Dad had bought it. I left the company laptop because it belonged to him. I took no financial files. When I came downstairs, Mom was still standing beside the keys. Back at Audrey's, I slept for 4 hours and woke to a voicemail from Officer Holt. She asked me to call before answering any questions from the company or its attorney. I returned the call with my hands shaking. Russell Ellison had filed a complaint claiming I manipulated payroll accounts, created irregular vendor records, and removed confidential financial information after being confronted. He was telling investigators that the missing $74,300 might lead to me. Officer Holt said the accusation did not erase my statement, but changed what investigators needed. She asked whether I had copied records, altered passwords, or transferred money. I answered each question slowly, hearing my father's confidence behind it. He knew I kept no files at home. He knew the company laptop remained on my desk. He knew I had built the accounting procedures now used to describe me as dishonest. That was the cruelty of the accusation. It borrowed my own care, my own access, and my reputation for accuracy, then turned them against me. For 5 years, Dad had praised me whenever my work protected the company. The moment my work threatened Caleb, the same competence became motive, opportunity, and suspicion. I asked Officer Holt whether she believed him. She said belief was not how records were examined. The accusation took several seconds to settle into meaning. My father had not merely chosen Caleb over me. He had decided that if the family needed a criminal, it would be me. For the next hour, I sat on Audrey's sofa answering questions about crimes I had discovered rather than committed. Officer Holt asked whether the accounting system recorded access and whether anyone could change the cloud archive from inside the company. I explained that deleting a local report would not erase the encrypted copy automatically transmitted after each compliance review. For the first time since Dad filed the accusation, I heard something other than fear in my own voice. I heard the part of me that knew the system better than he did. Officer Holt told me not to access company accounts, even if an old password still worked. Investigators would obtain records through formal requests. I agreed. After we disconnected, Audrey took the phone from my hand only long enough to set it on the coffee table. "You need food," she said. "I need a lawyer." Both can be true. The concussion made ordinary tasks feel distant. I could not look at a screen for more than a few minutes without nausea. Bending to tie my shoes sent pain across my forehead. Every unexpected sound outside Audrey's duplex made me think Caleb had found the address despite the order. The financial damage arrived more quietly. My final paycheck was withheld pending a property review. I had $4,000 in savings, but no job, no home, and medical follow-up scheduled after my insurance ended. Audrey offered to let me stay as long as necessary. Her kindness made me ashamed because I had been taught that needing anyone gave them the right to decide for me. I opened one of Mom's voicemails. She cried through most of it. She said Dad was terrified, Caleb was not sleeping, employees were asking questions, and the entire situation could still be repaired. She never asked whether my head hurt. Her grief was sincere, but it orbited everyone except the person who had been injured. Lena arranged an appointment with a trauma counselor through the hospital's victim services program. I almost canceled because I imagined counseling as another room where I would have to persuade a stranger that my reaction was reasonable. Instead, the counselor asked me to describe what safety had meant in my family before the assault. I told her safety meant Caleb was in a good mood. It meant Dad had no financial problem to solve, and Mom had no secret she needed me to hold. It meant I had completed every task early enough that nobody could use my mistake as permission to explode. "Those are conditions," the counselor said, "not safety." The distinction unsettled me. Conditions could be satisfied only temporarily. Real safety could not depend on guessing another person's anger correctly. She helped me make a list of immediate decisions: medical follow-up, medication, housing, communication, finances, and the protection hearing. The list was not a recovery plan for my whole life. It was permission to solve one day without solving my family. I left with the same headache and fewer imaginary obligations. For several hours, I considered calling Officer Holt and saying I had been confused. I imagined Dad restoring the apartment code, Mom carrying groceries upstairs, and Caleb keeping his distance until the family declared the danger over. The fantasy felt warm because it used familiar furniture. Then I remembered the framed slogan breaking before my skull struck the wall. Going back would not prove I had exaggerated the danger. It would prove the danger still controlled the price of my shelter. On the fourth day, Lena Ortiz called from the hospital advocacy office. A woman connected to Caleb had asked to speak with me, but Lena would not share my number or location. The woman was Hannah. My first response was suspicion. I wondered whether Caleb had sent her, even though she had been gone for 6 months. That thought showed me how quickly fear could turn another person into a possible extension of him. Lena said Hannah possessed information she wanted to submit independently. She was willing to meet at the advocacy office with separate arrival times and no exchange of personal addresses. I agreed. Hannah was already in a small conference room when Lena brought me in the next afternoon. She wore a gray cardigan and held a document envelope across her lap. I had not seen her since the separation. She looked more rested than I remembered and less willing to make anyone comfortable. Her gaze settled on my bandage. I heard what happened. I sat opposite her. "From Caleb? From your mother. She called to tell me you were trying to put Ruby's father in prison." The sentence was so exactly shaped like Mom that I could hear her voice inside it. Hannah said she had not come to tell me what decision to make. She had come because, when she left Caleb, my parents described every incident as a marital misunderstanding. If my assault was examined alone, Caleb would describe it as another misunderstanding. She did not want either of us isolated inside his explanations again. Before Caleb's anger changed the shape of every gathering, Hannah and I had spent long afternoons together while Ruby was a baby. I brought groceries when Hannah was too exhausted to shop. She taught me how to glaze the ceramic bowl that later sat in my apartment. When Caleb interrupted, we made room for him without noticing how often he required the room to rearrange itself. Our distance began after Hannah stopped laughing at his jokes. At family dinners, she corrected details he changed and left when he insulted her. Mom called her cold. Dad said marriage required flexibility. I watched Hannah become quieter, then mistook her quietness for judgment of me. The family had made her isolation look like a personality problem. Sitting across from her, I saw that she was not colder. She had simply stopped spending warmth on people who converted it into access. She opened the envelope. There were photographs of a bedroom door split beside the lock, a kitchen chair broken across its back, and bruises along Hannah's wrist. Repair receipts matched dates preserved in messages from Caleb. In those messages, he apologized, blamed pressure at work, accused her of provoking him, and promised that no one would believe she was afraid because he had never been arrested. Hannah had saved everything, not because she had planned revenge, but because Caleb could make her doubt an event within hours of surviving it. I needed a record that did not love him, she said. I looked at the photographs until shame moved through me like heat. After Hannah left him, I had sent a message saying I hoped she would remember how much Caleb loved Ruby. I had intended compassion. What I had offered was another reason to endure him. I believed them, I said. Not completely, but enough. I should have asked you. Hannah's expression did not soften. You asked, then you explained him before I answered. I remembered doing it. Every question I had posed contained the family's preferred conclusion. You're right. I apologized without mentioning my intentions. I did not tell her I had been manipulated too, although that was true. My harm did not disappear because someone had taught it to me. Hannah closed the envelope. I'm not ready to trust you. I understand. But I believe you. Those two statements belong together. Belief did not require instant closeness, and boundaries did not cancel compassion. My family had spent years pretending the opposite. Hannah told Lena she would submit copies directly to Officer Holt and to her family court attorney. Ruby had never said Caleb struck her, and Hannah would not question her for evidence. What Ruby had said was that she knew which closet stayed quiet when her father became angry and which floorboards squeaked if she tried to leave. The image of my niece arranging herself around Caleb's rage changed something inside me. Until then, part of me had treated reporting as a contest between my safety and Ruby's relationship with her father. Now I understood that the same silence threatening me had already begun educating her. My case would not decide Hannah's custody case by itself. Hannah's evidence would not decide mine by itself. But separated stories that Caleb could dismiss as misunderstandings formed a pattern when each woman was allowed to keep ownership of her account. Hannah set one boundary between us. She would provide evidence independently, but would not coordinate language with me or publicly present a united campaign against Caleb. After months of being called vindictive, she would not let the family portray our cooperation as fabrication. At first, the boundary felt like rejection. Then I understood its strength. Hannah was protecting the integrity of both accounts. We did not need identical memories or matching emotions. We needed the freedom to tell what happened without correcting each other into something more persuasive. Before we left, I asked Hannah about the ceramic bowl she had given me when Ruby was born. I told her it was one of the few things I took from the apartment. Keep it, she said. Ruby picked the blue glaze. It was not forgiveness. It was a small fact returned to its truthful meaning. The investigation into Dad's accusation began with access logs. Officer Holt worked with a financial crimes investigator who requested the vendor file, bank confirmations, my exception report, and the backup archive. I provided explanations through counsel and resisted the urge to prove my innocence by doing their work for them. That restraint was difficult. Documentation had always been how I made myself safe. Now safety required allowing other people to examine the documentation without controlling their conclusion. The records began answering. My user account had frozen the final transfer at 9:42 on the morning of the assault. It had not created Ridgeway materials or approved any of the 6 completed payments. Caleb's credentials had done both. The contact email, private mailbox, and receiving account tied the vendor to him. The amount already transferred was exactly $74,300. My compliance report had entered the cloud archive at 9:47. At 2:16 that afternoon, while Mom was driving me to the hospital, Dad accessed the local vendor folder. Over the next 2 days, new authorization pages appeared with dates that made them look months old. The original cloud copies contained no such pages. Looking back, I recognized how long Dad had chosen not to know. Twice during the summer, he had asked why cash reserves were shrinking despite full crews. I suggested a vendor audit. He postponed it, saying Caleb understood field costs better than either of us. When a tax deposit nearly missed its deadline, Dad covered the shortage from a credit line and warned me not to embarrass Caleb by reviewing his purchasing access without cause. The irregularities had frightened him, but suspicion let him preserve 2 incompatible beliefs: that the company remained under his control and that Caleb remained worthy of inheriting it. A completed audit would have forced a choice. My frozen transfer forced it for him, and Dad answered by attacking the record rather than the theft. The investigator showed me signature timestamps on the added authorizations. Dad had not merely filed pages Caleb gave him. He had opened the documents, changed their dates, and saved them under his administrator credentials after seeing my injury. Each step required time. Each step offered another opportunity to stop. Dad's attempt to accuse me had required him to direct investigators toward the very system that preserved his alterations. The office camera did not provide a clean recording of the assault. A filing cabinet blocked most of the records room interior, and there was no audio. But the footage showed Caleb entering after me, the door closing, the framed sign shifting violently, Mom rushing inside, and more than 30 minutes passing before anyone drove me to the hospital. It could not tell the entire story. It did not have to. Officer Holt explained these findings without promising an outcome. Records supported parts of my statement, she said. Caleb's threat supported another. Dr. Nanduri's photographs and examinations supported the injury. Hannah's history remained independent. Evidence became persuasive through agreement, not magic. When I finished the call, I cried so hard Audrey thought something had gone wrong. They found the backup, I told her. She sat beside me without touching me until I leaned toward her. You knew they would. I knew it existed. That isn't the same as believing anyone would look. Being believed did not feel like victory. It felt like the release of a weight I had carried so long that my body hurt when it disappeared. Caleb responded to the investigation by testing the protection order. One of our aunts sent me a message saying Caleb needed me to understand that people who threatened the company could lose more than employment. She claimed she was helping us reconcile. When Officer Holt asked to see the full exchange, the earlier messages showed Caleb had dictated the warning and instructed her to send it. The violation did not involve him appearing at Audrey's door. In some ways, that made the family pattern clearer. Caleb still believed every relative was a hallway through which he could reach me. I documented the message and did not answer him through her. The court added the violation to the record for the full protection order hearing. Mom called Audrey the same evening. Audrey did not confirm that I was there. She took Mom's number and asked whether I wanted it. I waited until the next morning to return the call with Lena present. Mom sounded exhausted. Dad had told her the new authorization pages were legitimate. Caleb had told her Hannah fabricated her photographs. She had tried to hold both explanations together until Officer Holt asked about billing archives stored on an older company drive. Those archives included copies of the original Ridgeway invoices. They also included an email Hannah had sent Mom months earlier containing a photograph of the broken bedroom door and a request that Mom help persuade Caleb to seek treatment. Mom had replied that marriage became dangerous when private mistakes were documented for outsiders. "I thought I was calming her down," Mom said. "You were warning her to be quiet." Mom began to cry. This time, I did not rescue her from the meaning of what she had done. She said Ruby had recently asked whether she would have to visit Caleb alone. When Mom assured her that her father loved her, Ruby asked whether love was why she had to hide. No family explanation could make that question harmless. Mom and I had spoken every morning during her treatment. I drove her to appointments, measured medication times, washed her hair when lifting her arms hurt, and slept nearby after surgery. During those months, she called me the daughter who noticed what no one else did. On the telephone now, I wanted to ask why noticing Caleb's violence had transformed that devotion into betrayal. I wanted her to name the point at which my care stopped counting, but the answer was already present in every choice she had made. She valued my attention when it protected the family. She feared it when it revealed the family. "If I give them the archive, your father may never forgive me," she said. "I know. Caleb will say I abandoned him. He might, and you still may not forgive me." That was the condition she had been circling. She wanted accountability to guarantee reunion. I could not offer that without turning forgiveness into another payment extracted from me. "This cannot be a trade," I said. "The truth has to matter even if I never come back." Dad wanted Mom to sign a statement supporting his claim that I controlled every accounting entry. He said the company, their retirement, and the employees depended on it. Caleb wanted her to deny receiving Hannah's email. For the first time, protecting the family required Mom to place a provably false story above both her daughter and granddaughter. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. The old answer rose automatically. Tell her which choice would restore us. I let it pass. "Tell the truth," I said. "Then accept what it costs." Mom gave investigators access to the billing archive. She acknowledged the email from Hannah, the delay before taking me to the hospital, and Dad's effort to make her support his altered records. Then she left the house she had shared with him for 37 years and moved into a furnished rental. She did not become innocent by changing sides. She became accountable for the first time. 2 weeks after the assault, I entered the county courthouse for the full protection order hearing. My laceration had closed, but a narrow red scar remained near my hairline. Light still triggered headaches. Audrey sat behind me. Lena waited near the aisle. Hannah attended with her attorney, but did not sit beside me, preserving the separation between our cases. The previous evening, I had tried to rehearse every possible question. I wrote dates on index cards and arranged them across Audrey's dining table. When I forgot whether Mom cleaned the office before or after taking me upstairs, panic convinced me one uncertain detail could erase everything else. Audrey collected the cards and placed them in a stack. "You are allowed to remember like a person," she said. I understood only after Lena repeated the idea in court. Accuracy did not require pretending concussion preserved every minute. I could separate what I remembered, what records established, and what remained unclear. My parents treated uncertainty in one corner as contamination of the whole account. Truth strengthened when I stopped forcing it to be flawless. Caleb arrived with Dad. He wore the Navy suit from Ruby's school recital and looked smaller without work boots. A crew or a family office around him. Dad did not look at me. Mom sat on the opposite side of the courtroom alone. My hands shook when I was called. I had rehearsed the sequence with an advocate, but the first question emptied every prepared sentence from my mind. Then I saw the exhibit photograph of the cracked built on trust sign. I began with the transfer. I described freezing it, refusing to unlock it, and telling Caleb I would show Dad. I described Caleb blocking the door, taking my phone, gripping my arm, and driving me backward. I described the white flash when my head struck the wall and Mom looking at Caleb before she looked at me. Caleb's attorney asked whether concussion made my memory unreliable. I said it affected portions of the drive and hospital wait. but not the confrontation I had documented before the injury, or Caleb's messages afterward. He asked whether I hated Caleb because Dad planned to give him the company. He showed me a photograph from Ruby's 6th birthday. Caleb stood behind my chair with one hand on my shoulder, both of us smiling. The attorney asked whether we had once been close. I said yes. He asked whether Caleb had helped me when I returned during Mom's cancer treatment. I said he moved my furniture and covered payroll during 2 hospital appointments. The questions were meant to make affection contradict violence. They did the opposite. I had never claimed Caleb was cruel every minute of his life. The good memories explained why I stayed, why I lied after the stairwell, and why reporting him cost me so much. Harm did not become imaginary because the person causing it had also been kind. "Did you want your brother arrested?" the attorney asked. I wanted to leave the hospital without him waiting to finish what he started. That answer changed the room for me. I was not there to prove I had always hated him. I was there because he had made safety impossible without outside protection. I wanted my brother to stop hurting people, I said. The company was never worth this. The answer was not polished. It was true. The court reviewed the medical records, threatening message, prior injury disclosure, indirect contact, and preliminary evidence supporting the financial motive. Hannah's evidence was referenced only through proper filings. Ruby was not asked to appear. Mom confirmed the treatment delay and said she had pressured me to describe the assault as an accident. When she stepped down, she looked toward me. I could not give her comfort without abandoning myself in the moment I had finally chosen to occupy. I held her gaze, then turned back to the judge. The judge asked whether I believed a continuing order was necessary if Caleb promised to avoid me voluntarily. I looked at the aunt's forwarded threat, then at Caleb. He stared at the table, performing restraint only after every private route to me had become evidence. I said voluntary distance had always ended when Caleb wanted something. I needed a boundary that did not depend on his mood or my parents' willingness to enforce it. The full protection order was granted. Outside the courtroom, Dad passed close enough that I smelled his familiar coffee. He said nothing. Caleb was directed through another exit. Mom remained near the courthouse doors, waiting as though I might invite her to walk beside me. I did not. Audrey and I descended the steps together. My knees weakened halfway down, and I stopped. For years, I had imagined courage as the absence of hesitation. That morning, it was simply the decision to take the next step, while everyone who taught me to doubt myself was watching. The criminal and financial cases continued for months. Accountability moved at the speed of interviews, subpoenas, bank records, motions, and postponed dates. There was no single afternoon when justice arrived and repaired everything. During that period, recovery remained stubbornly ordinary. I attended medical appointments until the dizziness eased. I practiced driving again on quiet streets because traffic lights triggered headaches. I completed job applications at Audrey's table, then closed the computer whenever shame told me every employer would see Dad's accusation before seeing my qualifications. Counseling taught me to notice how often I conducted imaginary trials in my head. I prosecuted Caleb, defended Mom, cross-examined Dad, and rehearsed explanations for relatives who had never asked a sincere question. None of those arguments changed the people involved. Gradually, I stopped giving them every quiet moment I possessed. Caleb's receiving account showed that the false vendor payments had covered gambling losses and personal debts. Investigators connected the transfers to his approvals, messages, and attempts to alter the explanation after I froze the final payment. Faced with the assault evidence, order violation, and financial records, he accepted a negotiated plea addressing assault and theft. His sentence included incarceration, restitution, required treatment, and enforceable restrictions on contact. The judge's order did not transform him. It created the first sustained period of his adult life in which other people were not required to protect him from what he had done. Dad accepted responsibility for falsifying business records. He continued insisting he had acted to save the company, as though motive could turn a false document true. Legal penalties, lost bonding confidence, and creditor demands forced him to surrender control of Ellison Restoration. The company was sold through a supervised restructuring to another local operator. Most employees kept their jobs. I was relieved, but I stopped using their livelihoods as a measure of whether reporting my assault had been permissible. Dad and Caleb had endangered those jobs when they stole and concealed money. I had named the danger. Mom separated from Dad and began counseling. Once a month, she mailed me a letter. The first letters explained, the later ones acknowledged. She stopped asking when I would come home. I allowed written contact because paper gave me time. I could read a letter with my therapist, set it down, answer weeks later, or never answer. Mom's effort mattered. It did not grant her automatic access. Dad sent no apology. Through relatives, I learned he believed I had chosen strangers over blood. I no longer tried to correct him. Estrangement hurt, but pain was not proof that a boundary was wrong. Hannah finalized the divorce. The custody order required supervised contact and professional review before any expansion. Ruby received counseling from someone trained to help children understand that an adult's anger was never their responsibility. Hannah and I did not become instant best friends. Trust returned through small, ordinary acts. She sent a photograph of Ruby using the blue ceramic bowl to hold paintbrushes. I sent Hannah copies of messages relevant to her attorney and did not ask what happened afterward. Sometimes respect looked like remaining available without demanding entry. Audrey and I rebuilt our friendship differently. I stopped disappearing whenever my family created an emergency. She stopped pretending my canceled plans had never hurt her. When I found work, I paid part of the rent without turning repayment into a way of escaping gratitude. The new position was with an independent building cooperative seeking a compliance analyst. During the interview, I disclosed that I was involved in an active case connected to my former employer. I expected suspicion. Instead, the director asked how I had preserved the original records. I explained the automated archive, separated approval permissions, and documented exceptions. I also identified the company's failure. Relatives' access had been treated as proof of trustworthiness. The director did not ask me to defend my family. She asked what controls I recommended. For the first time, I discussed Ellison Restoration as professional experience rather than an inherited identity. I had learned valuable work there. Acknowledging that value did not require returning to the conditions under which I learned it. For years, my family had called precision cold whenever accuracy interfered with Caleb. At the cooperative, precision meant 18 people could trust that payroll, insurance, and vendor money went where they belonged. 6 months after the assault, I signed a lease for a one-bedroom apartment across town. The landlord handed me 2 keys attached to a paper tag bearing only my name. No company logo, no family conditions, no door code Dad could cancel from his office. Audrey helped carry boxes. Hannah sent the ceramic bowl wrapped in a new dish towel because I had left it at Audrey's during the move. Mom mailed a housewarming card but did not appear. I had not given her the address. When the last box was inside, Audrey hugged me and left for work. The apartment became quiet. Silence had once meant listening for Caleb's boots, Dad's instructions, or Mom's careful knock before she asked me to surrender something. This silence asked nothing. I stood before the blank living room wall. For a moment, I saw the records office again, the framed slogan, the diagonal crack, the blood on my fingers. The scar above my eyebrow had faded, but it remained visible when light struck from the side. I no longer covered it with my hair. My phone vibrated. A monthly letter notification from the post office service had arrived, telling me Mom's envelope was ready for collection. I did not rush to retrieve it. I did not delete the notice either. The choice could wait until it belonged entirely to me. I placed the phone face up on the counter. Then I removed my new key from the lock and set it beside the phone. The ledger had preserved the truth my father tried to rewrite. The doctor's telephone had turned a locked hospital room into the first place where I was free to choose. The keys I returned had ended my access to the family's property, but they had also ended the family's access to me. I had once believed telling the truth destroyed us. Now I understood that truth had revealed what our unity required: Caleb's violence, Dad's control, Mom's silence, and my willingness to absorb all three. I still loved parts of them. I still mourned birthdays, Sunday dinners, and the brother who ran behind my bicycle promising not to let me fall. Grief did not mean I had invented the wall. Love did not make the threat harmless. Understanding them did not require returning to them. The wall in front of me was clean and unmarked. I could hang photographs there, paint it, leave it empty, or change my mind. No slogan told me what the room was built upon. No one else owned the meaning of what happened against it. For the first time in my life, home was not the place where people insisted they loved me. It was the place where I was safe enough to believe myself.